Hi everyone, it's James here. Welcome to another video, and once again I am joined by my friend from across the pond, Richard McCook. Hi Richard, how's it going?
I'm doing okay, James. Struggling in the weather, but I'm doing fine. How are you?
Yeah, I was just remarking before we came on camera that I'm literally drenched in sweat, but that might be pressure from the from the video that we're about to do, and my anxieties about the kind of things I'm going to be talking about in your presence. So we'll have to see how we get on with that. So the idea for this video, viewers, is we're going to be talking about side one versus side two of albums that we know and love. And I guess this is a topic which is as old as the hills, really. Artists who, when they're making their track lists for their albums, trying to work out which songs are going to go on side one, which songs are going to go on side two. There was a certain art to it back in the day, I think. There are some great examples of classic albums which are very consistent, either in a good way or a bad way, either like great all the way through or crap all the way through. And then there are some records which distribute the good stuff and the bad stuff sort of evenly, so it's a bit of a pick or mix. But then there are the records where for some reason you've got a very strong first side or a very strong second side. Doesn't necessarily mean that the other side in question is bad. It just means that it's overshadowed in some way. And Richard, we were talking, weren't we, about this? It seems to be, in most cases, side one seems to be the strong side. I think you were saying you were finding it easier to pick or choose or think of albums where it was front loaded, side one being the strong side and side two being slightly lesser so. Is that, am I right in thinking that you found that?
You are right in thinking that, but I tried not to fall into the trap of picking a side where all the singles are on that side, which
Okay.
obviously makes it better because those are the singles that are lifted, those are the best songs. And I tried not to fall into that, although I did on a couple of occasions. But
Right.
but, but there's one where I actually went for the side that didn't have any singles, but we'll come to that.
Okay. Right. So then. Good stuff. Well, what I've tried to do in I think pretty much every case, I've not tried to second guess myself. I've not tried to go looking for records. I've not tried to you know, dig around the back of my collection. I've tried to pick things that sprung to mind quite easily because I know from my younger days there were definitely records where I was quite aware, yeah, side one is really good or side two is really good. I had that experience quite a lot. So hopefully these will make sense. Shall I go first?
Go ahead.
Is that okay? All right then. So I'll show one which to me is a very very clear example. So just to be clear, we're going to do side one first. We're each going to show five records where side one is the strong side, we think. Then we're going to do each take it in turns to show us side two. So I'll go first with this one. Now I know this is not something which everybody agrees with. I know our good friend John Heaton here on YouTube is a big fan of all of this album, including side two. He really loves the medley. But for me, Red Rose Speedway, it's got a very strong first half, and for me, the second half really does let the side down. It starts off really well with Single Pigeon, the first song on side two, could have been on the White Album. It's an absolute classic. But from there, it just starts to slide, I think. By the time you get to the medley, you really do think this is really kind of letting the side down a bit, quite literally. It was meant to be a double album originally. I think if that medley had not been at the end of the final side of the record, which it wasn't on the double album, I think it came at the end of side three. Works fine like that. It just doesn't provide a really strong close to this album. With side one, you've got a great run of songs: Big Bomb Bed, My Love, Only One More Kiss. Um, Get on the Right Thing, not quite so keen on that one, but then side one ends very strongly with Little Lamb Dragonfly, great McCartney classic. But for me, side two just really seems quite limp in execution. Really, you got that really long, boring instrumental track, haven't you? Which doesn't really go anywhere. It's a kind of Pink Floyd wannabe. I sense that you like this. You like this tune, Richard. Anyway, so that's all I'll say. So Red Rose Speedway, it's still a record that I'm really fond of. I don't hate side two, but I just think the way this album was put together, I think there's something went wrong when they were assembling it, and it just doesn't seem very balanced. Side one very strong for me anyway. Side two less so. So there's my first one.
I don't fully agree. I think the only two bits that let down side two are Hold Me Tight and Lazy Dynamite.
Yes.
being
Oh,
so repetitive.
no, I don't agree with that. I think Lazy Dynamite is one of the good bits of the
No,
medley.
I think it's just an extension of Hold Me Tight. It's just repetitive. That's all it
Mm,
is. As going into the Hands of Love
mm,
and Power Thought, I think are great little songs, which I would love them to have been released,
mm.
on their own.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
I don't hate all the medley. I like some parts of it. I know Ross Goodall and myself were doing a video recently, and we both agreed that there are definitely some good parts of it. But it just, as a thing, I think it's because it's so kind of overshadowed by the Abbey Road medley, and maybe a bit of a transparent attempt to do that again, and it just doesn't quite gel. Anyway, over to you.
right, well, my first one for side one, and it may be a surprise, it is my favorite artist of all time. And I'm not picking the obvious here. There's two obvious albums in the 80s I could pick, but I'm going to pick the last one in the 70s, and it's Lodger
Hmm.
by David Bowie. Now, the two singles actually are on side two, DJ and Boys Keep Swinging. And in between those two songs is the magnificent Look Back in Anger. But then it falls,
Hmm.
just falls apart with Repetition and Red Money, which are two of his worst ever songs. Side one, however, is so experimental. He starts off with Fantastic Voyage, which is a very slow song, which his vocals are great. It's almost like a Life on Mars in a way from '79, but it works so well as an opener. Then you get the very, very odd African Night Flight going into Move On, which I think is extremely catchy. Really enjoy it. Then the Assassin, which could have been a single, and it was in Holland, which has got a really good Turkish groove to it. And then side one finishes with the magnificent Red Sails. So overall, I think that side one of this beats side two, even though the first three songs in side two are great, but the last two let it down completely. And the Red Money is actually a reworking of the Iggy Pop song Sister Midnight from The Idiot. And it's actually better. So it is. It's the opener of The Idiot, and it's better than Red Money. So for me, side one of Lodger gets it.
Yeah, good one. I mean, we've talked about this before. I'm fairly certain we've discussed those final two songs. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'd agree that they were two of his worst ever songs, but the album definitely seems to end on a bit of a damp squib. I think particularly if you compare it to the previous two Berlin records, which have these really quite notable climaxes, that one does seem to tail off a little bit. But yeah, I mean, side one is tremendous. I keep meaning to do a Bowie ranking video, and when I do that, you might be quite pleased at where Lodger falls, because it's a record that has really, really, come round for me in the last few years. Good one. Righto. Now, this next one for me is a record that I know that you have, because I've seen you show it on your channel, but I don't know how well you know it. They're a band that you like, and in fact, I sent you one of their records, but not this one. And I've got a feeling that you maybe perhaps don't know the records inside out. But this is Highway to Hell by AC/DC. Now, I had a bit of a thing with AC/DC records when I was a teenager because their sound was so kind of loud and intense, and because Bon Scott was always screaming his throat out. Generally speaking, after I'd listened to side one, I'd kind of had enough and wanted to listen to something else. So the side one of all my AC/DC records, it tends to be
Yep.
the side that I listen to the most because I'm a bit obsessive. When I listen to an album, I can't start it from side two. I have to start it from side one. It's just one of these kind of weird things. So if I've had enough by the end of side one, then side two ends up not being listened to. So I did go back and check to make sure I played both sides of the record a couple of times, and I still think actually that side one is much stronger. So this record, it starts out with Highway to Hell, which is possibly their greatest ever song, at least from the Bon Scott era. Girls Got Rhythm, fantastic song. Walk All Over You, fantastic song. Touch Too Much, brilliant song. Beating Around the Bush, not a great song, but it's quite a good side closer. It's very fast, it's very kind of edgy and really good. So you got that great run of 4 tracks. And then side two for me has got two great songs on it. It's got If You Want Blood, You've Got It, and Love Hungry Man, which is a fantastic Bon Scott vocal. But the other songs are a bit like side one, but not as good. So Shot Down in Flames is like a sort of not as good version of Highway to Hell. Get It Hot, even though I've listened to it twice in the last week, I can't really think how it goes, really. And then Night Prowler at the end, 6 minutes, a slow blues song. Well, why would you put a 6 minute slow blues song at the end of Highway to Hell? It just strikes me as being a record where they've just not got it right. They should have scattered some of the great stuff onto side two a little bit more, evened it out a bit more. It's just a record that comes out of the gate, all guns blazing, and then you turn it over, and apart from those 2 songs, which are as good as the songs on side one, essentially you've got 4 great songs on side one, 2 great songs on side two. So for me, that's fairly clear. Cut and dry case. Highway to Hell, AC/DC.
I remember whenever I did show that, I just bought it, and I even said that I really enjoyed about 3/4 of it, but the last quarter fell apart for me, and
Right, okay.
especially the last song, which I couldn't get through at all. I had to lift the needle, so I did. So I
6
agree with
minutes. Yeah, okay, good stuff. Yeah, I mean, I would put a word in for Love Hungry Man though. Check that out again. Just listen to it on its own, because it's a track where Mutt Lang, the producer, he worked with Bon Scott in the studio, really trying to get him to, in Bon's words, sing it properly. He said he was so used to singing and screaming in the studio. That track, Mutt, made him work on his vocal, and he actually turns in a really accomplished vocal. So that song is worth checking out, Love Hungry Man. But anyway.
Well, my second choice, I did fall into the trap, and this side one is full of singles. But I'm not going to say side two is good, because side two is not good at all. And that is Clash Combat
Oh.
Rock. Now, with side one, it opens up with Know Your Rights, which was the very first single, and it's actually my favorite. It's the most the wee rockabilly bit at the end, which I love. Then Car Jamming is great, sort of guitar-y type riff song. Should I Stay or Should I Go? Rock Casbah, you know about that. Red Angel Dragnet with Paul Simonon on vocals. The guy cannot sing, but it's got a really good rockabilly bit in as well. And then it finishes with Straight to Hell, which is one of their better later songs. However, side two, all I can say is the only song I like on that side two is Ghetto Defendant. Overpowered by Funk, don't like it. Adam Tan, don't like it. Sean Flynn, don't like it. Inoculate the City, don't like it. And Death is a Star, I don't like it. So this is a definite, honestly, this is a definite.
Okay.
One side, really good Clash music. Second side, I can't abide, and I never could, because I bought this whenever it did come out in 1982. So that's my second choice, is Combat Rock.
Okay, well, this is a bit of a bombshell moment, Richard, because I am going to be the first person to say "How very dare you," because I I love that album all the way through, and
Yeah,
yeah, I don't know what it is. It's a record that at the time when I first discovered it, I didn't like any of it really, apart from the 2 big hit singles. But over time, it's really grown on me and kind of seeped into my bloodstream somehow. But I will go back to it again and have a listen to see if I can see what you mean, because I do tend to stream that album rather than listening to the vinyl. I do have the vinyl, but I've streamed it quite a lot in the last few months, and to me, it seems like a fairly cohesive album statement, and I don't really think of it as being 2 halves. So that's interesting. I'll go back to it and tell you whether I need to undo my "How very dare you." I go. I guarantee that that you will have a "How very dare you" coming up later in the video from me. Okay, so let's get to that. Now, this next one is one of your favorite bands. So you've got the album, and I know this is an album that you overplayed and don't like anymore for that reason. It's this one, "Day at the Races."
right.
Now,
Okay.
now Queen, obviously one of my favorite bands, and growing up I was obsessed with them. But there's a couple of Queen albums where I loved them all the way through, or maybe 2 or 3. The first album I loved all the way through. Sheer Heart Attack was one of those ones. News of the World, The Works, The Game. But there's a few where I preferred side one or side two. I won't kind of run through all of them, but this one very very clearly to me was always side one. I thought side one was just superb from start to finish, and I just never really cared for side two. I mean, it starts out all guns blazing again. Side one, Tie Your Mother Down, brilliant. You Take My Breath Away, brilliant ballad from Freddie. Long Away is a song, I don't know if that's a well-loved song by Brian. I've always loved it. The Millionaire Waltz, which is just an absolutely absurd Freddie conceit, brilliant. You and I, great song by John Deacon. So doesn't really put a foot wrong. And side two, I feel a bit guilty saying it, but I've never been a big fan of Somebody to Love. And I know, I know it's one of his, I know it's one of his greatest songs, but to me, it's repetitive. It's just the same things. Find me somebody to love. It's like, how many more times do I need to listen to that? So I'm afraid, you know, I don't hate it, but it's just it's never been a top ranking Queen single for me. White Man, I think, is a real meat and potatoes Brian May kind of song. It doesn't do anything for me. Good Old Fashioned Lover Boy, I think, is probably my least favorite single from the original Greatest Hits album. I think it's okay, but it's nothing special. Drowse is my least favorite of the 1970s Roger Taylor songs. And then Tia Toriati, Let Us Cling Together, is a song I don't care for. I find it a bit zippos aloft waving. And if you compare side two to side two of Night at the Opera, which has the Prophet song, Love of My Life, and Bohemian Rhapsody on it, you know, for God's sake, I think it really does let the album down. I think they could have gone either split the songs a bit better or done something. But for me, side two, I never really liked it as a kid. I hardly ever listened to it. I would listen to side one of this and then move on to something else generally. So that's one that really had to be there. So there we go. Day at the Races.
Well, I agree with you. Side one is better, but I think you're very harsh on side two, especially Somebody to Love and Good Old Fashioned Lover Boy. I don't care for White Man either, and I'm not a big Drowse fan. And Tio Toriati, yeah, it's okay. You have to be in the mood for it. It's a standard sort of Brian May Save Me type song, but still, I'll accept that. Now, I may actually offend you with this one. And I'm going to say that side one of this is okay. It's decent. And side two is bloody awful. Secret Messages.
How very dare you, Richard?
That's right. Secret Messages, which is good. Yeah. I enjoy it. It should never be the single though. It's not single material, but I do like it as an opener. Loser Gone Wild and Bluebird, I think, are very good songs, as is Take Me On and On.
Yeah.
Now that's only 4 songs, which helps this album. It helps side one because there's only 4 on it. But side two starts off with 4 Little Diamonds, which is an attempted rewrite for me of Don't Bring Me Down, and it doesn't work. Stranger, good song. Danger Ahead, standard rock song. You can see Bryan Adams singing that.
Oh.
Honestly. And then you get Letter from Spain and Train of Gold, which are dumb. Sorry, they are. They're dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. And then Rock and Roll is King, which is it's okay, but it's a bit of fun. But side two is terrible. Now, this too, as you know, was originally going to be a double album. And those songs like Letter from Spain and Train of Gold work better within that setting of a double album. Because I always say a double album is more forgiving of rubbish tracks. And a good example would be if you say, what do you think of Why Don't We Do It on the Road? And people say, yeah, great. Love it. It's not that bad. If I said, well, if that was in Sgt. Pepper, would you love it? Oh, God, no. So I always say that double albums are more forgiving. And so that gets my side one is definitely far better than side two, Secret Messages. Sorry.
Harsh. Have you ever noticed that Train of Gold is a bit of a rewrite of Showdown?
I never noticed, though. I must give it another listen. Never clicked.
Yeah. Play them back to back. And then there's a song on one of the Jeff Lynne's ELO albums. It's the second song on the first one is another Showdown rewrite. It's got that sort of funky clavinet in it, that kind of sound. Yeah. I like all of side two of Secret Messages, apart from Rock and Roll is King, which I do think is a bit of a turd, really.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, so that was a bit of a how very dare you moment, but let's just move on. Right, so The Doors. Now, I must confess, this is one that I did re-listen to last night because I wanted to reassure myself that I wasn't misremembering, and I was slightly misremembering, but I'll still go with side one. So the Doors' first album starts out with Break On Through to the Other Side, which I think is one of the greatest rock songs of the 60s and maybe of all time. and concludes with Light My Fire, about which you could say the exact same thing. So essentially, side one is bookended by these two absolutely immortal, fantastic songs. And then what's in between is actually not too shabby. Soul Kitchen, fun track. Crystal Ship, absolutely brilliant. It's such an atmospheric, tuneful song. 20th Century Fox is good fun. Alabama song, Whiskey Bar, I listened to it last night and I so enjoyed it. It's just so kind of ridiculous and off the wall. It's just completely like only the Doors could pull that off, you know, really. And then you got Light My Fire, like I say. Now, side two, you turn it over, Backdoor Man, dull. I Looked at You, okay. End of the Night, dreary. Take It As It Comes, okay. It could have been on side one. But then I was thinking to myself, and then you got the end. Like who wants to listen to the end, you know? But I actually listened to it last night. I thought it was tremendous. In fact, I played it twice through back to back. I thought it was absolutely stunning. So I kind of I rode back in my mind a little bit because I was thinking, well, you know, side one's got Break On Through and Light My Fire. Side two's got the end, 11 minutes of this sort of Oedipus, awful kind of Apocalypse Now thing, you know. But I did think it was great last night, but it's still not kind of like, you know, finger clicking catchy Doors exactly, is it? So I'll still kind of say, yeah, side one is great. Side two does have the end, which I think as long as you're in the mood for it, it's great. But then the rest of side two is not up to much really at all. So there we go, the Doors.
Yeah, I agree. I do. I think side one's better. And I agree, very few could pull the Alabama song off.
Yeah.
And David Bowie doesn't even manage to pull it off. I think the Doors version's better.
And what do you think of the end?
It's okay. You have to be in the mood for it. You really
Yeah.
do. It can be a bit of a dirge if you're not in the mood for it.
Yeah.
But it's a good song. But I still think Break On Through, Light My Fire, and The Crystal Ship are the highlights of that whole album.
Okay.
So
Good stuff.
my next one, and it's one of the best-selling albums of all time. And I'm not saying side two this is bad. It's not bad. It's just side one's perfect.
Yeah.
It's Rumours. And if you look at Rumours, it starts off with second-hand news. Now, you know I'm a huge Lindsey Buckingham fan, and that's just pure Lindsey Buckingham. Then Dreams, Stevie Nicks is one of her best ever songs. Then the beautiful acoustic guitar picking of Never Going Back Again. Don't Stop, overplayed, but still a great song. Go Your Own Way, one of the finest rock songs ever. And then the gorgeous Songbird by Christine McVie. Gorgeous. However, side two starts with the chain. And I have never really loved that song. I've always liked the end bit with the what I call the Formula One bit with the bass
Yeah.
line.
Yeah.
But I've never really, I think I've heard the bass line of that first, and the start of the song was always a bit of a disappointment. You Make Love and Fun is an okay Christy McVie song. It's good, but it's not brilliant. It's nothing compared to the ones that she wrote in side one. I Don't Want to Know is a very old song. That's an old Buckingham Nicks track from 1973 that was brought back for this album. And it's a bit of a country song and it's enjoyable. However, Oh Daddy is one of Christine's Yonathon songs. Just don't get it at all. And Gold Dust Woman is a decent atmospheric Christine or Stevie Nicks song. So side two is not a disaster. It's good overall. But side one is phenomenal. And that's why I would say for Rumours, side one over side two for me.
Well, I mean, I have never owned that album, and I don't know why. It's just not a record that I've ever owned. I have heard it obviously a few times, and yeah, so I don't really remember those songs you're talking about on side two very well. The Chain, just overplayed, I think, probably. Like you say, I think as soon as a song becomes a TV theme, it's had it, hasn't it? Really, it's just going to be overexposed, and yeah, it's just a record that I can't quite believe I've never actually owned it. Just never found a copy of it, I guess. You know, it's like Joshua Tree again is one of these ones that I should have. I've just never actually bought it. So yeah, I'll take your word for that one, Richard. Right, so we've reached my final one for side one, and this is the big "How Very Dare You" moment. Okay, now you've done this to me already with Secret Messages. I think I'm going to do it to you worse. I think it's going to be worse, possibly. I'm going to go.
No,
with...
I totally agree with you.
Phew. God for that. Yeah, I mean, I listened to it again last night to make absolutely sure. I All I can say is that I've always connected massively with side one, and I've never connected at all with side two. And it's one of these things where I can, in my mind, I can hear all the songs on side one. I know all the words. I can know, I know it all back to front. It flows. It's got all that beautiful Rick Wakeman piano playing. It just seems to hang together, and it's like part one of some just really amazing album. And then side two just seems to, I don't know, it just seems to break the illusion. Song for Bob Dylan, I've never liked because I don't want to hear about Bob Dylan on this album. On side one, he creates this total self-contained world where he's just, completely inventing his own language, it seems, and just writing about strange things, kooks, life on Mars. You've got no idea what he's singing about, but it all just sounds fantastic. And then all of a sudden, Song for Bob Dylan, and then Andy Warhol. I don't want to know about Andy Warhol and Bob Dylan. I want him to continue singing these really mysterious piano-y songs. And I mean, Queen Bitch is the only song which I think, yeah, that's a really good song, but it doesn't really belong on the album. The Bewlay Brothers is one of those songs I think it's just so dense and impenetrable. It sounds like, I'll tell you what it is. Side one sounds like David Bowie, like the accessible David Bowie, the one that we can all know and love. And side two sounds like David Bowie for sort of hardcore David Bowie fans. It seems like there's a kind of split there or a schism there. So that's my take on it. I could say more, but I don't want to drone on too long. So tell me, Richard, why am I right then? Why is side one better?
Right. Because I myself could do without the two name check songs like Andy Warhol and especially Song for Bob Dylan. Now, I do like the cover version of Fill Your Heart. I think it's twee and it's fun. And
Yes,
it's a little bit like Cooks on the other side. However,
definitely.
Queen Bitch, brilliant. And I have to say that the Bewlay Brothers is brilliant as well. It's like finishing side two the way Quicksand finished side one. It's
Yeah.
just those two songs, Andy Warhol and Song for Bob Dylan. I wish they weren't on it. And there is another song, and I can't even remember the name of it now, that should have been on it. It's on the Toy album, and it's an absolutely blinding song.
Mm.
And Shadow Man is what you call it. And it was
Mm.
recorded around those sessions. And I always said it should have been on instead of Song for Bob Dylan. Okay, so I'll do my last
Yeah.
one. And actually, this works quite well because it's Iggy Pop's Lost for
Yeah.
Life. It's co-written by David Bowie. Side one, Lost for Life with Bowie, absolutely brilliant. And then you get 16, which is just an Iggy Pop song, real good hard punk. Some Weird Sin, another co-write with Bowie, very good. And then The Passenger, which and I think Susie and the Banshees covered that as well. And then finishing off with Tonight, which Bowie himself covered on the Tonight album, which is completely different to the version here. Side two starts off well with the song Success, which was the single but didn't do anything. Then you get Turn Blue, which is absolute tripe. Neighborhood Threat, which Bowie himself covered, but he did a really good version of it. But he couldn't have got much worse because this is rubbish, and then Fall in Love with Me is rubbish as well. So for me, Lust for Life is a definite side one. It's one of the first ones that came to my mind whenever I thought of doing this. It's just the last three songs are, yeah, you have to be stoned, I think, to listen to them. So Lust for Life is my last choice of side one.
Well, that's one that I've only ever owned on CD, so I would need to re-listen to it with that in mind. I've never had to kind of turn it over. So it's interesting, isn't it? When you have that experience of listening to a record, obviously it's very clear to you which is which, but on a CD, it all kind of blends into one,
Exactly.
really.